Joining us now is Cliff Schecter, our good friend. Cliff is an author. He's a commentator, and he's a public relations or communication strategist. His firm, Libertas, LLC, handles media relations for political and social as well as corporate and nonprofit clients. And he is co-founder of We Act Radio, which is the mothership for this particular program. Unfortunately, while we are old friends, the topic is a serious one. So, Cliff, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Seems we have these conversations a little bit too much, huh, RJ?
Yeah, we really do. You know, Cliff and I always talk whenever there's an incident of gun violence, major gun violence in this country, because if we were just talking about any mass shooting, Cliff and I would be talking every day. But when there's one that is widely publicized, as there have been recently, more than one, we always talk about what it means for our society, our culture, and because Cliff is so deeply involved in the gun policy community, the gun control policy community, what it means for our policies there as well. So, Cliff, first of all, again, thanks for coming on. And I guess I would say, in the last couple of weeks, we've had two major issues of violence. We've had the Planned Parenthood shooting and now the shooting in San Bernardino, about which there's still a number of questions. But what, if any, let's start with this. What, if any, implications does this have for the efforts to get sensible gun control in this country?
Well, again, thank you for having me on and asking. Let's start by saying how sad it is even that we just that we started off that way, because essentially what we have to say now is that, the two major ones that have happened, Colorado and San Bernardino, I don't think most people know that in the same day as San Bernardino, earlier that day, 4 people were shot in Savannah, Georgia,
right,
and one of them was killed. So that counts as a mass killing, and I think, or mass shooting, and I don't think almost anybody's talked about it because you can't. Because you're so busy with this. Other things, I'll just say very quickly, and I'll get to answering. In a Waffle House in Mississippi,
right,
a server asked a gentleman to put out his cigarette. He shot her to death. I can't remember where it was, but in America, let's say, someone drove and parked in front of their neighbor's house instead of their own house mistakenly and was shot in the head for it. These are the things that in any other high-income country like us would lead all the news. But they get passed over because of the insanity. So the implications, I've seen a couple phases in how this stuff has moved forward. Before kind of the Gabby Gifford shooting, I was a lone voice, me and maybe a couple other folks who worked on this issue, and really the Democrats had run away for it for mistaken reasons, but they had. Obviously for Newtown, there was a huge effort. In a functioning Senate, 54 or 55 votes, because Harry Reid only voted against it procedurally, would have been enough. 20 years ago, that would have been enough to pass it in the Senate, and we would have gone to the House, and we would have seen what would have happened there. Of course, we're living in filibuster world, so that was blocked. And I've seen 2 more phases more recently, kind of like mass shootings. They're speeding up. The shooting in Oregon, and really almost the constant sort of people coming to me and saying, what can I do? I've never thought about this issue. This is sickening. I have kids. I'm scared. I mean, somebody, asked a New York Times writer, you may have seen that, RJ, about how often people think about mass shootings when they go in public, and people are now thinking about it.
Right.
So we have our very own, American exceptionalism, if you want to call it that, our exceptional American version of terrorism now that people think about all the time, and sort of like, that's great that you're trying to protect us from people in the Middle East. But you're not protecting us here. It doesn't really matter if you're doing that, and anybody can shoot anybody. So I think, first of all, a number of states, have made improvements. I think you're going to see more. You're going to see 2 ballot measures in Maine and Nevada that will overwhelmingly pass to extend universal background checks to those states. You're going to see there's a couple of state legislatures that are taking this up. But the problem is right now, look, the Republicans took over the majority of state legislatures. They took over obviously the House by a huge margin. We just had 2 votes yesterday, again on background checks, and on the terror gap, which is probably the most insane of all of these things, which is you can be on a terror watch list, not be able to get on an airplane, and you can still get a gun. So, all the Republicans, with the exception of Mark Kirk, voted against closing the terror gap, and all Republicans, with the exception of the 4 who supported closing background checks when we voted on it 2 years ago, which are Toomey, McCain, Collins, and Kirk. All the rest voted against it. And Heidi Heitkamp, proving herself once again a useless Democrat, voted against both.
You know, there's something that's going on here in the discourse, Cliff Schecter, that I really, I don't say I struggle with it because I understand it, but I struggle with how to address it. And it's this, I got the sense after, and these are such horrific shootings, and every one of these should be a national day of mourning, as far as I'm concerned. And perhaps if we were constantly in mourning, people would understand the gravity of the situation. But I got the sense, you had the shooting in Colorado at the Planned Parenthood, right-wing Christianist terrorists killing a number of people there, and there was an eagerness on the part of the right, I felt, to change the subject, and almost, in my opinion, a kind of unseemly glee when it turned out that the San Bernardino shooter had a Middle Eastern last name.
Oh, of course.
I felt as if we have a culture where, first of all, I can't mince words anymore. I feel that the right climbs over the bodies of the dead to push its agenda, and that's what they were doing. And that's what they were doing after San Bernardino. But secondly, why, how do we address the fact that if one person of a Middle Eastern background commits a shooting, we can spend billions of dollars in response and all have to take our shoes off if some idiot tries to set off a shoe bomb. But if on a daily basis we have mass shootings because we have such easy access to guns, including weapons of mass murder like assault rifles or semi-assault rifles, then why is it that one lights up everybody's switchboard, but the other, you get, as you say, we're starting to get more of a response, but it's such a challenge to get people to understand the underlying issue of sensible gun laws here.
Well, that is the culture we're being sold, and really, as in so many other issues that you cover, whether they be economic issues, whether they be civil rights issues, the evil genius, and it's hard for me even to say that, the sickening nature, maybe is a better way to put it, of the right-wing alternate universe that they've successfully created from the Powell memo and things of that sort that I'm sure you've discussed on this show.
Sure.
Is what it is. Because if you're being told 24 hours a day on Fox News, it's only Muslims are terrorists, then you believe that, and then you turn off Fox and you turn on Rush Limbaugh, and then you go online and you read Breitbart and National Review online. By the time you're done with all of these things, you're in that echo chamber we all talk about, and you don't believe facts. Facts are not true, right? Supply side economics works. Banning Planned Parenthood would lower the rate of abortion. More guns equals less crime because that it's worked well in Somalia and Yemen. I mean, nothing they say makes any sense, and that's the whole point. It doesn't have to anymore because what they've done. I mean, the most interesting thing is that Robert Reich wrote something a little while ago about talking to a mainstream conservative congressman, and saying, what's happened? What is going on with your Republican nominees and whatever? And he's like, they're all crazy. He's like, he said, I don't think I could vote for any of them except for maybe Jeb Bush, and he's not going anywhere. He's like, essentially, what's happened is Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, the Koch brothers, they've poisoned the American mind and they've destroyed the Republican Party. That was his exact quote. And that's what's happened is that, look, we're all human beings, but we still, we still have an amygdala, right? We still have not prehistoric, but we still have that part of our brain that goes back before we really could think in the manner we think now. Logically, we hope, not all of us, I guess, but many of us. And they can set that off. And so you take very normal people who at one point were maybe even Kennedy Democrats or FDR Democrats, but then suddenly they start watching Fox News, and there are plenty of studies on this, and they're watching this every day, and they get turned into right-wing Republicans. And it's happened in many rural areas. People that once were stalwart Democrats have been turned into these right-wing Republicans. And that's the problem because, as I tweeted out the other day, I said, obviously, when you get shot by somebody white, we all know that you get a do-over, right?
Right, a mulligan,
it's not really death. You get to come back. I mean, who cares who you get shot by? I don't care if they're Muslim. I don't care if they're white, African American, woman, man, gay, straight. If you get shot and you get killed, you get shot and you get killed. Guns work for everybody. So the whole point is that passing sane laws stops Muslim terrorists, Christian terrorists, Jewish terrorists, all terrorists.
Right. And I was on, it's interesting. Well, I think my first or second media appearance ever was on Sean Hannity's radio show. It was Sean Hannity and Gary Bauer against me. And we're talking with Cliff Schecter. And it was about terrorism.
I still bet on you, by the way, any day of the week and twice on Sundays. But
well, Sean almost threw me off the show on the air. But, one of the things I said, look, let's stop for a second. Let's assume we all want to keep Americans safe and we all want to be smart about it. And there was dead air for about 5 seconds. And I said, so why don't we figure out what's killing Americans and go after that? And he said, "You Democratic hack," was his answer. So, literally. So, I guess you're right. First of all, I want to say I agree with you, Cliff Schecter, that they've sort of, the shorthand is the lizard brain. They're triggering the lizard brain with all of this stuff. That if you hear a white guy shoot somebody, well, it doesn't create that sort of innate, frankly, racist fear that they can trigger.
Fear and loathing and all the things that they play on.
Yeah, of the other and all that. But then my question to you, since you're in this world, is what do all of us who are in the world of commentary and so on, media, what do all of us do to counteract that? Or is it just like the lizard brain is too powerful and we can't save this society? I mean, I don't want to reach that conclusion. So what do we...
Well, thankfully, that's not mine. And if I did think that was our conclusion, sadly, I guess I'd have to say that, and we'd all have to hang it up and stop doing what we're doing. Right. But it's not. Because we've gone through these. I mean, there was a point in time, you have to remember, that a vast majority of people thought that Jim Crow was the correct way to go.
Right.
And the lizard brain certainly controlled that a vast majority of people thought women should absolutely not have the right to vote. We've been through these periods in American history before where the right-wing lizard brain is controlling something, and we have continually gone out of our way to fight back, protest, counter-protest, call congressmen, message, and then on a professional side, messaging and polling, and you can't give up. And I'm not going to, I don't even want to use the term silver bullet, of course, for what we're talking about. But there's no one way that this is all going to be defeated. We didn't stop smoking one way. I mean, we haven't stopped it, but we didn't lessen smoking. We didn't lessen, drunk driving. Think of all the different things. We looked at it as a public health crisis. We looked at demand. We looked at supply. We looked at all the ways we could get to it, laws, norms, and that's what's going to happen with this. With all of what they're doing right now, they are changing norms because people that never cared about this before are saying enough. I mean, I just got off a conversation with somebody who's never been active on this issue before, and it's like, where can I, as somebody who's an investor but has always remained a very progressive one, said, where can I put my money? What can I do? And I'm getting these calls. I'm fielding these calls a lot. I'm talking to people like this a lot. So if Congress didn't, and state legislatures at this point in time weren't so fundamentally unrepresentative of the people overall, we wouldn't just have background checks. We'd have about 15 other gun measures that all get a majority of support. But what it is that, we're going to have to concentrate on those specific races, and we'll know where they are in the Senate. One of them is right here in my home state, Rob Portman, who just betrayed the people of the state again, a guy who voted for the assault weapons ban when he was in Congress in the House, but I guess, the NRA got to him, started paying him off, and which is clear because we can look at that money. And so we'll say who these guys are, and we need to do better than the other side. And we can do better because we have before, and you know it. We've done better recently. We have gay marriage. We have a $15 minimum wage in some places. We can do this, and it's not going to be easy, but we're going to keep fighting. And I'll just finish quickly. I know I'm probably using up too much of your time here, but I wrote a piece for the Daily Beast pointing out all the victories that we've had to remind people that even though the headlines are terrible, behind the scenes, the NRA tried to put guns on college campuses in 16 campuses in 16 states this year. We beat them in 15 of 16, including places like North Dakota and Arkansas and stuff. I mean, they've been losing. Their own people put out a memo saying it was a train wreck, their last legislative session. We have beaten them on 90+% of the legislation they've supported. So people need to understand that, yes, the legislation they're supporting is so insane you'd think it would be easily defeated, but it's not easily defeated because of where we are. So there have been a lot of gains, and we're making a lot of movement forward. It's just, sadly, while that's happening, we have this patchwork of laws, and too many people are still dying.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, one, I love that answer and the attitude behind that answer and the information behind that answer. Number two, no, you're not taking up too much of my time. I do have a couple, more things I want to briefly touch on with you, and then we have a couple minutes left. One is, I feel as if this part, there is a deep-seated part of the American culture that's tied to guns. If you've read the history, the Gunfighter Nation, and some of the other really fascinating works of history, but I feel there's a way to channel that. Just as you mentioned the smoking analogy, the way smoking used to be tied in with sexual attractiveness and sexuality in this
Right.
country. Somehow we managed to divert that to something else, probably also demeaning, but at least not
And drunk
injurious.
driving used to be considered funny. I mean, you go back and you watch like sitcoms from the '70s, people would joke about it. I mean, it was it was considered hysterical. You got in the car, you drove drunk.
Right.
Changing attitudes. First you change the culture, then you change the politics. Right.
Right.
Gramsci, I think that was. You need. I mean, that the norms and the expectations and all that needs to change. It needs to be that somebody who loves guns needs to do that in their own place on their own time and pass regulations to get there, which is a similar way that we are with cigarettes at this point. And it will take. You're right. I mean, those things aren't easy, but if we look at those fights, we've won those fights. We've moved forward. We are moving forward, as I said to you. And if you want, and you want to put it on the site, I'll send you that piece because there's much more than that. I mean, they tried to put guns and get rid of concealed carry permits, so you could just get a concealed carry with no background check whatsoever, nothing. We defeated virtually all of those. I think they won 2 of like 15. I mean, everything they pass is terrible. Even one thing, but we're defeating them on almost everything, and we're also making forward progress. California next year is going to move past background checks on guns to background checks on bullets. It's going to be on the ballot. That will definitively win that one too, and they're going to institute other measures. They've got a gun violence restraining order there, where obviously if you're somebody who we know should have a gun taken away, the police know or your family knows. And California is important because they're a tenth of our population. So or more. What happens? I think they're 12% of our population. What happens there has an inordinate influence on the rest of the country. So people just need to know. I mean, it's hard to keep your head up when this stuff's happening. I know it because I'm buried in these things all the time. But I really want to do more. I feel it's my job to do more, and maybe I failed in this count to let people know that we are doing positive things. And again, the American history with guns, Australia had that history and passed amazing gun safety efforts after the Port Arthur massacre in '96. Canada was a frontier nation, and they've passed all sorts of, just to say that we've loved guns here and to act like no other frontier country did, is not to look at history accurately. We can do it. We've done it with other things, as you pointed out. And I think we will. I'll just say quickly, I mean, you and I are perfect examples, RJ.
Right.
You're someone who grew up shooting guns. I'm somebody who shot competitively on a rifle squad in New Hampshire for many years. I loved shooting competitively. I still would love to go to the range and do it if I had the time to do it. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. So we separate that gun culture from the gun culture of the open carrying guy who drapes himself in a Confederate flag, threatens people, thinks our government's coming to spy and knock his door down. Well, maybe spying's accurate, but thinks the government's coming to knock his door in and take all his guns, and that the black president's going to lead to some sort of a racial war and all these other idiotic things. Those are different cultures.
All right. And unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, but I couldn't agree with you more on all counts. And as always, Cliff Schecter, it is great to have you on the show, and I wish we were usually talking under happier circumstances, but thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, buddy.